All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 4 of Keeping It Juicy. Let's start off first by talking about who this episode is sponsored by. So, this episode is sponsored by Megan Pisano Design, based in Morris County, New Jersey. Megan Pisano Design is a full service interior design firm that specializes in creating simple, chic designs and bringing her clients' dream home to life. Reach out to Megan Pisano at Megan Pisano Design on Instagram for anything from a paint color consult to a full room design. And I've met her, she's amazing, and my guest has met her as well. And she's just a great person, and I love her style. So definitely make sure to check her out on Instagram at Megan Pisano Design. And I can't even express my excitement for our guest today. So our guest is Stacey Uhrig, Urhig.
UH.
Dang,
Listen, I've been married for 24 years and I'm still trying to figure out how to spell it.
Yeah, because I want to say you are because it's your, but yeah.
It's UH.
RIG.
And it's like your
UHR.
Ig.
Ig.
But if you're in Germany, they're going to say Uhrig.
We have Stacey Uhrig on today. And I met Stacey less than a year ago. I mean, we probably met.
I think it was June or May.
Okay. We met and Stephanie Blum brought me to a big dinner.
Yeah.
I never joined, but that's okay.
I was late, and I was cursing
You
my
were
husband
late.
out, and I was like sweating because I couldn't find parking in Morristown.
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
on the phone with him going, but because I was late,
We sat next to each other.
I got to sit next to Caitlin.
Yes,
and
yeah.
that was like the beginning.
Yes, I remember in the beginning of the dinner, and by the end, I was just hanging on her because that's what I do. I'm a very an affectionate person. So, I'm super excited to have Stacey on for many reasons. Her being a friend, her being a business owner, and her being a. Tell me what you are again, because I don't want to mess it up.
Sure.
The way that you want it to be said.
I'm a coach and a trauma specialist.
Yes, a coach and a trauma specialist. And just for some background, I love telling this story because when we first met, she said she was a trauma coach. I say trauma coach quickly because it's
cool.
just easier. And my first thing out of my mouth is, well, I don't have any trauma. My childhood was great. I went to Disney World every year. My parents were fantastic. I had a great childhood. And she probably rolled her eyes and, she's like, okay, yeah. But then when we got to know each other more, and she's done many workshops in the studio, trauma, the first thing you think about trauma is, I think, sexual abuse, physical abuse, violence, and Stacey's going to go into this a little bit more, but it's also just the little things, and it's not the event that occurs, which now I know, it's how you kind of live your life with that feeling. And again, Stacey will go more into it. And you should follow her on Instagram at Stacey Uhrig, STACEYUHRIG.
Good job, girl.
Because she has great information. But first, I just want to start off with Stacey telling us a little bit about who she is and what she does.
So you mentioned it. I'm a trauma coach. Yeah.
In her own
By
words.
trade, I have a couple of certifications, right? So I'm certified as what's called a trauma recovery coach. Got that through the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching. And then I'm also certified in a therapeutic model that's called rapid transformational therapy. And that's done under hypnosis. And that was developed by a world-renowned psychotherapist named Marissa Peer. So that's my trade, right? And I really like to prefer to call myself a coach and trauma specialist because you said it. I think a lot of people disqualify themselves from working with a trauma recovery coach or a trauma coach because they don't think they've had it. And so to make that a little bit easier, I just like to refer to myself as a coach and a trauma specialist because then people will be like, oh, I just need the coaching part. I don't need the trauma part. Till they come to then work with me and they're like, oh, it's trauma.
Right.
I'm like, it might be, yeah.
And it's little things, as you've said this before. You had a soccer game in the morning as a child, and you're supposed to go to your grandparents' house, and you're so tired, but your parents are just like, let's go, get it together, get yourself together, don't be selfish, this kind of stuff. That's not what you think of trauma, but it's how you then live your life being a people pleaser or something of the sort.
It's like, I always say trauma is never the event, right? It's never what happened. It's the interpretation that you made in the moment that then is hindering the way that you're living your life after. So using your example, you know, maybe the kid goes and plays soccer. Maybe he wanted to go. I'll just use he, but maybe he wanted to go. Maybe he didn't even want to go to soccer. It could be either way. But maybe regardless, they had a great time, but now they're tired. Let's just say, for hypothetically, the kid is 6. Okay. And the parents are like, no, 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 but we have to go to the grandparents' house and we have to do it because everybody's going to be there. So you have to get it together. And now what you're really doing is you're asking a child to adult up. Children need rest. Rest is productive, it's good for them, and it's going to actually create what it is that you want, which is good behavior, good impulsivity control, right? But if the parent's like, no, but we have to because this is what everybody else is expecting. And side note, the parent doesn't know how to say no. The parent doesn't know how to say, that's going to be too much for us, and chose not to do the soccer game, knowing it was going to be a long day, right? So the parent's like, well, I can do it, so therefore you should be able to do it. But the parent's 40 and the kid's 6. And then the kid goes. They don't feel seen. They don't feel heard. They don't think what they've been saying matters. I can't. I'm too tired. Maybe they're even throwing a tantrum. And then they get to the grandparents' house, and guess what? He's on the floor. He's throwing another tantrum. He's melting. This is the term people would, my kid just had a meltdown. Instead of getting frustrated with the kid, I always say to people, why don't we just take a step back and look at all the things we were asking the 6-year-old to do and whether or not that was reasonable for the human experience? Like, where's the downtime? Where is it okay to say no? Where is it okay to have some rest? But yet we're frustrated with the kid. So now the kid is getting in trouble just for being 6 and not having the coping strategies that a 40-year-old might have. The trauma in that is that that kid learns no matter how I express myself, it's not enough to be heard, seen, or understood. And then when I literally can't handle it because that window of tolerance is so short, I then get in trouble.
Anything Stacey talks about is just so enlightening. And I think, just as a reminder for this podcast, we're not going to be talking necessarily about everybody's business or what they do. That is part of it. But I really want to dive into things that have happened to people to bring them where they are today. Stacey is very successful, and I just want to talk about, which we've spoken about, and Stacey is happy to share. Is one time a few weeks ago, maybe months ago, we were at Toca Vez together.
So good.
So good. You're welcome, Toca Vez. And I had previously had a panic attack that day, I believe, because I think it was in July actually, because July 1st invoices went out for my business and nobody paid their invoice. So I had a mental breakdown because my bank account for my business was down to $550 or something. And that's, just to be very straight up with you, that's not very normal for me. There's usually a few $1,000s at least. I get very uncomfortable with there not being money. It's just something, I've had comfort with money my whole life. And so when I get uncomfortable, I get very scared. So I immediately went crazy in my head. I said, I'm gonna have to shut down the business. It's all over. I go very quickly with that. And I had a panic attack. I had to pull over on this side of the road, talk to my dad. And then I felt a little bit better, and I almost canceled with Stacey that night. But I went to see her. And I went to see her as a friend, but of course we always start talking about my trauma. And I told her about it, and you know, I told her about, like, what was going on in my life, the money, that kind of stuff.
Which, by the way, I was so grateful that you felt comfortable enough to have that conversation with me because we wrap money up in shame all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
So it was a testament to like how comfortable we
yes,
were with each other
yeah.
early on because not everybody wants to talk about their
Right, and usually
financial
I don't.
challenges,
Yeah.
right?
But and I think you had brought up something made me open up about it, and I said, and you said something, and I said, this is terrible. This is the worst thing that could happen to me. And you said, honey, this is not the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And so then you opened up about how you were in business with your father, your husband, you were all in the
Yes.
same business. and then a lot of stuff went down.
It all imploded.
So I would love to talk about that
Cool.
because since we had that conversation and my dad obviously helped me as well. I mean, I've been in the point where I've had $500 in the business count again, but I didn't have my mental breakdown. I knew that, the invoices would be paid, there would be thousands of dollars coming in. So I just really want to talk about what you've been through because this will also help somebody who
Yeah.
might be in the same place right now, and they'll know that they will get through it and get where they are today. So if you can talk about, when you were in the business with your father, how you even
Yeah.
got there and then the implosion.
Cool. So I did. I had a business with my brother and my dad in Parsippany, New Jersey from 1997. They opened it. I joined them in 1998, and
Mm.
we closed it under duress during Sandy in 2012. So we had it for 15 years. At our height, we had 60 employees, 60, and we had 16,000 square feet of grade A space, right? We had a $10 million contracted lease with Matt Kelly. Like, this was no small potatoes.
Yeah.
And long story short, when Lehman Brothers crashed, we happened to be collateral damage from that for a variety of reasons. But basically, we were a school. We had a handful of lenders that lent to the students. We trained software developers. We did very, very well, but it was very costly. And so people took a loan for that. And we went from 6 lenders to 2 lenders overnight because of the market crash. And then the lenders that were left didn't want to lend. Okay. Because a lot of the people that were taking our training were doing so to improve their career. And a lot of them were not working. And sometimes, if you took our training during the day, it was full time. So it used to be they could get the loan if they had the bank account or if they had a cosigner, and all of that literally got shut off overnight. So we had to scramble and figure it out. Long story short, it didn't work. And after 3 years of trying to make that work, we ended up having to close our doors under duress. When you're trying to make it work, you don't make the most rational decisions.
Right.
And what we decided to do, and it caused a lot of conflict in my own marriage, it caused a lot of conflict with me and my dad, was we were personally financing the business, which, shout out to small business owners, like, you don't think smart, right? So now you're borrowing from one to pay the other. So anytime we had more than $5,000 in a savings in anything, we just dumped it into the business. We completely tilted out our house. We took out, to the extent of what you could take out of your 401k, the max that we could take out of both of our 401ks, both my husband and mine. We were all doing it under the guise of, it's just a loan. We're going to get it back. We're not even looking to get it back with interest. We're just basically floating, right? Well, that didn't work.
Sinking, you mean?
You
We can
know,
laugh
and
about it now because
listen,
everyone's okay.
part of the biggest challenge of that experience, one of the biggest challenges in that experience, is I was the only female executive. And female and men don't think the same way. We don't react the same way. We don't behave the same way. And so I, with my intuition, could see the writing on the wall. And when I would share these things, I was told I was the Debbie Downer because I was saying things like, I think we just have to call it. Like, I think we just have to
Oh, you're
call it
being
what it is.
emotional, Stacey.
I was being emotional. I was being irrational. And, I started saying that like 18 months in, and here we were 36 months in. That means I've dumped a lot of fucking cash in. Long story short, we close under duress, and there's debts to Matt Cali, there's debts to Affinity Credit Union, upwards of $3 million. I mean, it was like we had huge revenue still to come through, but it wasn't sustainable. So the business closes. My husband was working there. I was a partner. My dad was a partner. My brother was a partner. All of our eggs were in one basket. So when it closed, we had no income coming in and we had nothing to pull from.
Or someone to lean on because the people you may lean on, your dad, your brother, were in it with you.
Yeah.
Which is.
And so I just remember saying to my husband, any credit card, because part of the problem was there was a few problems. Number one, there was tremendous shame because we had no money.
Yep.
And my husband and I personally were incredibly fiscally responsible. We've never carried a debt except for a mortgage and maybe a car payment. We'd paid off every student loan well ahead of schedule. We had no credit card debt. We've never carried credit card debt. So this was all, we were paying people's paychecks for 3 years with this money. That's where the money was going. That's where the money was going. And it ended up being, $350,000 when it was all said and done of what we had hemorrhaged over those 3 years. I didn't have that money. I borrowed that money. So then you owe that money back with interest. And we were not well advised, and we weren't thinking clearly, and we weren't able to pay that 401k back. And the whole plan closed when the business closed. So then we owed the bank, not the bank, the IRS, like sick amount of money. So now I had to pay back the 401k. I had to pay the IRS. I had to pay myself back on the home equity line. We were drowning. And thankfully, my husband got a fantastic opportunity, and it was a blessing. And it's always been a good opportunity, and it's been great for our family. But I mean, there was so much healing to be done, and my nervous system was a mess. I just was in that constant panic. I was crying every day. I was a mess. I had a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. We lived 25, 30 miles outside of New York City. It's not a cheap place to live. And I was saying things like, let's just sell the house. Let's just move south. We don't need to be here. Like, I'm not going to be stressed about trying to keep this house. It's just a fucking house,
Yeah.
right? At some point, my husband was at work. That job had started. My youngest one was napping. My other one was in elementary school. And I literally was in the fetal position on the floor in my kitchen. And I just thought to myself, my children are healthy. I'm healthy. We have a roof over our head. We can put food on the table. I can pay the heat. I can pay the water. I can pay the electricity. All of the stress has to do with money. All of the stress has to do with money. And I had to ask myself, why? What is it about the money that's causing the stress? And it was the fact that all of my sense of safety and security was wrapped up in how much of it I had. And without it, I felt I had none. And I also recognized in that moment that all of my contentment and my happiness was wrapped up in how safe or secure I felt, which meant without the money, could potentially have no happiness. And I just thought, oh, hell no, because I knew my husband and I were very smart. We had a real clear payment schedule and how we were going to have to live and get everything paid off. And I just knew it was going to be years and years and years until we got into a position where we felt comfortable. And I was like, I can't wait that long to not have this anxiety anymore and not have joy in my life. And so I just thought to myself, this piece of paper can be burned, shredded, eaten, ripped up, dissolved, flushed down a toilet paper. It is such bullshit. It has so much control over me, and I'm taking that back like right now. And that moment, I remember thinking to myself, I've never had less money and I've never felt richer, because
Wow.
I learned something in that moment that I would never forget, and I would live my life through that lens, right? The other thing I realized in that moment, and I said it to my husband when he came home, was this is for sure the hardest thing we've ever been through. It will not be the hardest thing we ever go through. We have 2 children. We have all kinds of life ahead of us, and things are going to happen that are going to be bigger, bolder, and scarier and more stressful than this. It's just that up to this point, and listen, we had gone through infertility, we had gone through 2 adoption processes, we had gone through a lot as a couple. I said, this is the most stressful thing we'll have been through together as a couple, but it won't be the most stressful thing. It's just the most stressful thing up to this point. And if we walk away from this having not learned something about ourselves, it will have been worth nothing.
Wow. And that's so impactful that Such and this is what I really want to get out to everybody. Something so horrible as
It was
this,
very scary.
and I'm sure, and like you said, impacted your marriage, your relationship with your father, your family, just your life in general. That number one, you can get through it. Number
Hmm.
two, like you said, money is literally a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It doesn't define who you are. And I think in the area that we live in, sometimes people think that it does. And people will drive Range Rovers, but you never know. Like that Range Rover could be $700 a month and they can barely pay
I
for it.
mean, let me tell you, I was so fucked up in the head
I can't imagine.
that, and I had to ask myself, like, why is the universe giving me this as the challenge? And I think I took that I had money for granted,
Mm,
which we'll talk about. Remind
hmm.
to ask me about that. But it makes me sick just thinking about it right now. You know, my kids were little, they were 3 and 8. And I remember sitting and playing Monopoly with them and feeling sick to my stomach that I had more Monopoly money than I had money.
Wow.
And it wasn't
Wow.
a lot. It wasn't like I had a lot of Monopoly money.
Yeah.
And then that same week, I was driving past like Gil St. Bernard's, like in that area. And somebody in one of those big houses was having their driveway repaved. And I remember thinking to myself that I wanted to vomit because I was like, how much does that cost? Like, I have,
I always drive by on Mendham Road. They're always
and
getting
I was
driveways
like,
done.
but it was the Monopoly money that got
Mhm.
me, that really like brought me to my knees again. That I was like, this is scary. I was scared. I was like, how long is it going to take for us to get out of this? And are we, my husband and I, going to actually come out of this hole? Because
Together.
this
Yeah.
could destroy a marriage.
I mean, money, sex, religion, right? Are the two,
It could
three
destroy
things.
a marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, as two business owners, and, I grew up, my dad worked for Merck, my mom worked for Chubb. And I think money is such a big thing for me, which is so interesting because my parents lived so. Like my dad still has been driving the same car for 20 years, just got one, and just so fiscally responsible. And I've learned so much. And like you said, I've never had, other than mortgage and car, never had credit card debt, no other debt, anything like that. So these moments that, I mean, $500 in a business account is, I
It's
felt like
scary.
you did at that moment.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest with you, my father said, what is the worst thing that could happen? And I said I would close my business, and he said, "Is that worse than death?" And I said, "They sound the same to me right now."
Oh, honey.
And
And I
isn't
get
that
that.
scary? And I'm not that I talked to my
No,
therapist
but
about it.
I
It's not
get that.
suicidal. It just felt so dark, and I'm going to be doing hypnosis with Stacey because I have such fear of failure from maybe certain things growing up. My dad has a PhD, he's very smart, the expectations were high, but I just feel like money is, it's just such an interesting thing, and people find it so, they just, I don't know the right word. It's like the more money the better, the this, the that, the better the bag, the better the car, but it's just so not true.
It's really not. And I think, again, for me, I got really introspective in that moment. And I was like, what does this money represent that is causing my nervous system to feel like I'm dying? And it was the fact that I felt safe and secure. It
Right.
was my indicator of how safe and secure I was feeling.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when I knew I didn't have it, and I knew I wasn't going to have anything other than enough to meet our needs because we had all these things that we had a very aggressive payment schedule
Right.
back on. I knew in that moment, if I don't find a way to change my relationship with money forever, I'm never going to feel better. So I knew in my moment, my relationship with money changes now. Now, here's the thing. For the long time, the messaging I was giving myself is money's the fucking devil.
Mm,
Because it was blocking my joy,
mm,
right? And I needed to figure out how to have joy and happiness and safety and security without it. But I felt that it had caused so much negativity in my system, I didn't appreciate it at all, right? I saw it as my biggest stressor in life. And then as I was building my business, and not just this business, but the business I had before this, I wanted more money.
Mm.
Not because it was going to, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't
Like
going,
fulfill you or
no, it wasn't going to determine my worthiness or if I'm good enough. I wanted the money because I wanted to vacation with my family. I wanted to build memories. I wanted to easily and effortlessly be able to take my family to different parts of the world, different parts of the country, and explore it and enjoy it. That's what I wanted. This was about living life to its fullest, not about what car I'm driving, not about what bag I'm carrying, my address. It was about I want to have enough money to help my children gain these experiences and for me to have these experiences. So I knew I had to change my relationship with money. And so I started changing the way I would speak to myself about it. And I would start purposefully and intentionally saying things to myself like, money easily and effortlessly flows to me. Money is my birthright. Money will come to me in abundance. Money will come to me easily. I deserve to have money, and money's going to help me in my life. And the more I just started thinking that, I shit you not, that as I was starting to think it, little things would come into the mail. Like my husband owns a business and he has to file taxes in like 48 states. And it would be like a $3 check from Illinois or like a $5 check from Georgia because like his business would have overpaid like
right.
these might, but still it was money that was easily and
You can even
effortlessly
get 100 of
flowing
those.
in.
Yeah.
It was like crazy.
Yeah.
And then this is a beautiful story. I ended up, my husband and I had to make a difficult decision to remove my son from our public school district and place him at a private school. And we were not financially, obviously. I mean, I'm just telling you what we've been coming off of, but it was really the only option for him. And it was going to cost a lot of money. And I just kept thinking it it's going to come to us easily and effortlessly. We will find a way to do it. And I swear to you, my husband has never up to this point received this, and he's never since received this. But this one time when I was doing this mantra, his stepmother sent him a check in the mail for his birthday that covered a full month of tuition.
Wow.
And I was like, Matt, I manifested that shit.
Manifestation is real.
So I flipped back my relationship with money for it not to be the devil, but to be something that will help me and benefit me in creating the life that I want.
Words are so powerful, and going through things and learning from yourself and learning different relationships with money, with anything in life is, I think, super important and impactful.
Your mind controls your body, and your body controls your mind. And they are absolutely in sync all the time. And everything that you tell yourself, everything you give to your mind, it takes as absolute truth. It literally does not have the ability to say to you, that's a lie. So you have to be so careful. It's no different than being careful about how you eat.
Right.
It's a diet.
Right.
When people think about that, like, what are you feeding your mind?
Just, I think if you're listening to this and you're either wanting to start a business, you're in a business and you just lost all your money, you lost all your clients, you lost everything, just know that you will come back from it and start manifesting and start looking at your relationship with money and start looking at, I think what's really important, what you want to spend your money on. People will spend money on stupid shit that doesn't matter, but that's their choice. To me, spending money on food is my number one priority, other than clothes and mortgage and car. So I think that's super important. And Stacey, thank you for coming on to the podcast. And I have 3 questions for you that I ask everybody. So the first question is, what would your last meal be if you were on death row?
Oh my God. Well, it would have to include potatoes with truffles. There's no question about that. I'm a potato whore.
I love potatoes.
But then you add the truffle. I'm also a truffle whore.
Maybe just a plate of potatoes and truffle.
It would be enough. And cooked anyway, except for raw.
That's uncooked. And then the second question is, what is your biggest fear in life?
Not having joy.
Mm,
And really my not having the people around me feeling at peace within themselves.
wow. And then I don't believe in regrets. I think that everything that we go through in life is something we learn from. But if there was something that you could really look back on and make a change or do something different, is there anything?
No. No, I really wouldn't, because even that experience, I wouldn't have, and I gave you very high level of that story, but I would have not wished what we experienced and felt and the fear we had on my worst enemy. And it is the greatest thing that ever happened to us.
Wow. Listen to that and repeat that to yourself if you're in a position like Stacey and her family was. And please follow Stacey at Stacey Uhrig on Instagram. She has amazing things, and there are amazing things coming. Thank you for listening to this episode of Keeping It Juicy. You can find this episode and all the rest on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And as always, don't forget, keep it juicy.